Alrighty. I know y'all have been waiting. I know you have been waiting for my reaction to this. Sit back and relax. We're going to have a good time here. Because the critical drinker is here. That rhymed late to play the game. Bars! Let's screen record here. There we go. Y'all ready? Let's do it.
Now, like a lot of people, I tuned into the first episode of She-Hulk last week with, how can I put this, somewhat modest expectations. Basically, I expected the show to be just another lazy Marvel TV product, written and shot as quickly and cheaply as possible to keep the content sludge pipe flowing, with lame attempts at witty humour and an extra large helping of complaints about how generally awful and stupid men are. And well, that's exactly what we got. And I think one particular scene towards the end of the first episode pretty much encapsulates everything the writers wanted to accomplish with this show.
What he had to say about
I'm great at controlling my anger. I do it all the time. When I'm catcalled in the street, when incompetent men explain my own area of expertise to me, because if I don't, I will get called emotional, difficult, I might just literally get murdered. So I'm an expert at controlling my anger because I do it infinitely more than you.
Are you serious?
Oh my goodness, whatever could they be trying to tell me here? Now, as tempting as it is to sit and mock She-Hulk for his awful writing, cringy dialogue, flaccid CGI, heavy-handed gender politics, amateur acting, nonsensical editing and terrible pacing, but don't worry, I'll come back to that in another video. Believe that! I actually wanted to use this show for something positive for a change, because the more I think about it, the more I realise it's basically a textbook example of how not to structure a story and how not to develop a protagonist. So why not turn it into a bit of a learning experience for all of us? Grab your pens and notebooks, dear viewer, because it's schooling time. Now, as hard as it may be to believe, it is actually possible to make Jen's infamous rant function in context. But the problem with this episode is twofold. One, it doesn't actually show us any of the things she's complaining about, and two, it fails to establish Jen as a sympathetic, likeable character that we care about. The writers wanted a big emotional payoff with this scene, but they were either unable or unwilling to give us the setup that it needs to work. So let's explore how and why they failed and how they could have done it better. The problems begin in the very first scene where Jen...
Yeah, I'm curious as to what he's going to say about that, because I think he said it didn't show, kind of like how. So my thinking here is, because I don't know what he's going to say yet, so, but if they did show that particular stuff in the series happening to her, people probably would have flipped out even more. Like that could have come later. That little speech she gave could have came later. But if she was damn near, like she was talked down to by an incompetent man that explained her own profession to her, catcalled, I don't know what else she said, and damn near murdered. If someone tried to murder her, if all that stuff did happen in the series, and was all men, I think the fans would have flipped even more. So, let me see what he's got to say about that. You know what I mean?
Rehearsing a speech that she's about to give in court, and her two co-workers are listening in. Now, naturally, her female companion is positively brimming with praise. I mean, this girl just can't say enough good things about her, to the point where it becomes almost uncomfortable to watch. But pay attention to this scene, 007, because this is the very first time we meet our protagonist. It's the first chance we get to assess her demeanour, her personality, her mannerisms, and even her work environments. This is where the writers need to establish her as someone likeable, someone relatable, someone the audience can become invested in. But how to do this? Do they give her razor-sharp dialogue, a witty, fun, charming personality that you can't help but warm to? Maybe work in a few little flaws, insecurities and shortcomings to make her more human and relatable? No, they just have another character straight up tell us how amazing and smart and capable she is. She's fierce, she's a girl boss, she's crushing it. The script doesn't trust the audience to form their own opinions about this character, so it just straight up tells you what to think about her. She's great because we say so, okay? Don't question us. This kind of thing is a hallmark of weak, insecure writers who don't have confidence in their own work, and it's happening more and more in Marvel projects these days. Like Maria in Captain Marvel, who feels the need to tell the audience that Carol Danvers is funny and crazy and kind, despite the movie showing us the exact opposite. Or Loki telling his female counterpart how amazing she is, because otherwise we might not figure it out for ourselves.
You did it on your own. You had rings around it. You're amazing.
This is not how writing is supposed to work. The only voice of contention in the room comes courtesy of a man, but that's okay because he's quickly silenced and sent away with his tail between his legs. Yup, it's a Marvel show, alright. But let's take a step back from that and think what this does for Jen's character development, and that all-important scene later in the episodes. What it tells me is that Jen is already firmly in control of her life, her work environment, and the people around her. She's able to quickly and easily deal with objections, dissenting voices and challenges to her authority. That's a good thing, right? Well, not really. Keep in mind the conversation later in the episode where she complains about men constantly questioning her judgment, holding her back, and generally making her life so difficult that she has to constantly hold in the rage that builds inside her. That's telling us one thing, but the episode itself is showing us the exact opposite. She easily deflects her male colleague's doubts and sends him on his way without the least difficulty, and there's no indication that she's even particularly bothered by it. If anything, she seems mildly amused by the whole thing. She just blows him off and then gets right back to being showered with praise and adoration. And this is a real wasted opportunity to develop sympathy towards the character. Imagine this same scene where Jen recites her big elaborate closing argument, only for her more senior male partner to overrule her and flatly state that he's the one who's going to be delivering it. He might be superficially polite and consoling, maybe even giving her half-hearted platitudes like she's just not ready for this yet, but there's a more threatening undertone to his voice so that we know exactly what he's doing and why. We get to see her excitement and enthusiasm turn into crushing disappointment as she realises she's been held back from yet another opportunity. Now imagine how much more sympathy you'd feel towards her as a character. I mean, nobody likes to see good people getting crushed and sidelined, and instinctively you'd want to see her succeed. Now imagine how much more impact her rant later in the episode would have if we actually saw the negative impact of what she describes. But no, the writers were so desperate to have their first girl boss moment right off the bat that they had to make this
you got a point
victory
there,
for Jennifer. The scene feels more like them projecting their own personal gripes, frustrations and hang-ups, followed by the fantasy resolution they wish they could have had themselves, rather than a logical component of a bigger narrative. It was more important for them to score a quick, ego-stroking win rather than take the smarter option that would deliver bigger and more satisfying payoffs later. And unfortunately, that's a common thread in this show. Like in the next scene where Jennifer and Bruce are involved in a car wreck. Bruce gets knocked unconscious in the crash and Jen's forced to drag him from the wreckage, and in the process, some of his blood mixes with hers and she turns into the Hulk. Now, imagine for a moment how much more impactful this scene might have been if Bruce had been the one to survive the crash and Jennifer had been badly injured instead. So bad, in fact, that conventional medical science could do nothing more for her. Faced with a difficult choice, Bruce reluctantly gives her a blood transfusion, saving her life at the cost of her humanity by turning her into a Hulk. That would open up a lot of pretty interesting possibilities for their relationship. On the one hand, Jennifer would be rightly pissed that Bruce performed an invasive and life-altering medical procedure without her consent, and now she has to live with the long-term consequences. And on the other, you could have Bruce racked with guilt that he basically ruined her life, but also defiant because he ultimately took the difficult decision needed to keep her alive. That could result in a lot of conflict, but also a lot of very emotionally satisfying scenes between the two of them. But all of that would require time and effort to develop, probably over multiple episodes, and it's all just so much work. It would also mean putting their protagonist at a bit of a disadvantage, albeit temporarily, and needing the help of a man to get her out of trouble, and that's not allowed in modern Marvel writing because it goes against the rules.
He's got something different now.
Injured on the ground. They were repulsed at the idea of a strong man pulling her from the wreckage and making important decisions about her future without her input. And so, just like the opening scene that could have been the setup for a satisfying emotional payoff later, they instead took the short-sighted option and went for a quick, easy and cheap win. Of course Jen doesn't need Bruce's help. Of course she wrenches a buckled car door open, despite that being almost impossible for any human without heavy cutting equipment.
You know, I think, I would love to see the Drinker write Marvel movies or episodes of a series. I would love to see him write and see how it would perform. I think we would love it.
Of course she carries his unconscious body away from the wreck, despite him weighing 50 or 60 pounds more than her. She's awesome, she's a boss, she's killing it like she always does. And it's only because of this weak, dumb man's injured body that she happens to get some of his blood on her. What a selfish arsehole. Anyway, so she hulks out and wakes up sometime later in the bushes outside a bar in the middle of nowhere, and after staggering into the bathroom, she immediately encounters a group of comically helpful women who slather her in makeup, force her into some cheap clothes, and send her on her way, only for her to run into a group of evil men outside.
Yeah.
I mean, I assume they're evil because that's clearly what the writer wants us to think. The problem is that they don't really do anything all that bad. I mean, they show some mild
Just want to talk!
Clearly not interested, and when they persist, she hulks up and almost kills all of them, and it's only the intervention of Bruce at the last second that saves their lives. And that's it. The big payoff here is Jen scaring the crap out of a bunch of dude bros who normally would have been scary and intimidating to her, and whose only real...
They were hugging each other, I just noticed that.
Now, take a moment to think about this for what it really is, a logical building block of a larger story. Think about how much more impactful this might have been if it had happened earlier in the episode, before Jen's transformation. Imagine she was making her way home after a shitty day at the office, like, for example, getting passed over for a big court case, only to run into some drunken assholes who start harassing her. At first she tries to ignore them, then she politely declines their advances, but still they keep it up, getting more surly and abusive as the scene continues. We get to see and feel her growing panic and anger, and how hard she has to struggle to keep from losing her temper, and by the time they finally get bored and leave her alone, she's exhausted and upset from the ordeal. Think how much more we would empathise with her then, and how much more impact that big emotional payoff at the end of the episode would have had. But nah, the writers didn't want to do that. They wanted to do an easy breezy comedy where problems get resolved almost as quickly as they appear, and the main character just kind of bounces from one win to the next.
And in that instance, that's what I say in these times, like I was speaking about the other day when I was talking about Angry Joe's thing, where I think that as sensitive as people are about quote-unquote woke shit, everything that's under the umbrella, from the gender politics to the feminism to just everything and in between, I still think that if we had seen a scene like that, people would have got pissed off. Like, see, they're showing men harassing, like all men do is harass women. I could see that. I don't see that even going well. Because in that rant, if we had something for each and everything that she said, I still think people would have been pissed off. Would it have worked better? Yes. It would have worked better because it would have shown the reasoning that she had for saying that and not just saying it like a quote-unquote feminist rant, which is what most people saw that as. So I believe he's right. I just think it still wouldn't have worked, but it would have worked better. That's what I think.
They wanted the female power fantasy of standing up to male bullies, of being the bigger, stronger one for a change, of putting men in their place. They wanted to feel vindicated, validated and strong in a way they never had before. Yet again, they sacrificed long-term story payoffs for the quick dopamine hit of an easy win. The last point I wanted to touch on was the training sequence between Jen and Bruce. Having prevented her from killing a bunch of innocent civilians, Bruce takes her away to his beachside retreat so he can train her to control her Hulk powers. Which makes sense considering an out-of-control Hulk can basically decimate entire cities. Now, you might think this sequence would open up some interesting possibilities for their relationship. After all, Bruce has gone through a lot of shit because of the Hulk. This is a man with 15 years of tragedy, loss, disaster and destruction behind him. A lot of painful lessons that he can share with his cousin to help her avoid the same mistakes. He's the experienced mentor and she's the naive pupil taking her first steps down a whole new path. Instead, what we get are some quippy jokes that mock the Hulk and everything Bruce has gone through, and a montage whose only purpose is to show that Jen is apparently better than Bruce in every way. She immediately excels in almost every activity, is Bruce's equal or even his better in every competitive event, and on the one occasion where he demonstrates superior strength, she openly mocks him for being goaded into showing off. It's just that toxic male pride talking, I guess. Which is really weird because she's literally mocking him for being stronger than her when she was literally celebrating for being stronger than him seconds earlier. I guess it's okay when women do it. Actually, now that I think about it, that should pretty much be the slogan for the MCU at this point. But more importantly, it yet again blows another perfect chance to have some kind of meaningful character development between the two of them. Bruce has got nothing to teach her, no lessons to impart, and no wisdom to pass on. It's all just as shallow, insincere, and meaningless as, well, basically every single moment of Thor Love and Thunder. The only purpose of this segment is to bring us to that all-important emotional payoff. Now, just imagine how much more impactful that whole scene would have been if the writers had done everything I've suggested in this video. But they didn't. Just like the toxic male lawyer, just like the car crash, just like the drunk guys outside the bar, this episode is all about having Jen breeze through every situation with absolutely no difficulty. It's all about the easy wins, the cheap dopamine hit, the constant search for validation and ego stroking. What you ultimately end up with is less of a story with properly constructed setup leading to satisfying payoffs, and more of a kind of group therapy session. A chance for the writers to project all of their hang-ups and gripes and petty first world frustrations onto a bunch of on-screen strawmen that can be quickly and easily knocked down by their idealized self-insert persona. It's not about telling an interesting story or faithfully adapting the source material, it's about them. It's about making them feel better, stroking their egos, validating their life choices. It's weak, cheap, selfish writing from people who either can't or don't want to produce anything better. But hey, if you've got any interest at all in the business of storytelling, then She-Hulk is basically a perfect example of what not to do. And that being the case, maybe it does have a useful purpose after all. Now, since I've spent so long talking about writing, that serves as an awkward little segue into this neat bit of self-promotion. See, it turns out that my new novel, Dark Harvest, is now available to buy from all good bookshops. And a few shit ones. I'm literally practicing what I preach, and instead of sitting on my arse bitching about stuff that other people have made, I like to throw my own hat in the ring and see what I'm capable of making. And if by chance you're interested in picking up a copy, it really helps support my work, so I'll leave a link in the description. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. Go away now.
And go buy his book now. That's right, Dark Harvest. Good job as usual, man. Good job as usual. And funny as hell, as usual. Keep doing what you're doing. Yeah. Tumultuous times we live in. Tumultuous times. I tell you, the way things are unfolding with the series and with people's reactions, I'm very interested and even excited to see how the whole series unfolds, and because I get a lot of entertainment out of watching the drinker and the other people do their videos. Some people love it, some people don't like it, and I like both types of reactions, to tell you the truth. So go subscribe to the drinker, tell him Tyrone Magnus sent you, and I will see y'all in the next one. 10 million subscribers. Woo!